In Western Canada, if you were to look at a soils map of the prairies, there'd be a significant portion of it that would be represented as alkaline, which to me is a term that a lot of people like to work with. I personally, I like to know what is it that's causing, what is that is the actual nutrient or the soil characteristic that's causing you issues. And in general, I would say sodium is a huge culprit of a lot of acres that are unfortunately almost unfarmable because of the fact that they have such high levels of sodium, or in combination such high levels of magnesium and sodium, that they've got extremely high cation exchange capacity, very low organic matter. And those zones are very difficult to manage because to get a crop established in those areas is difficult with the equipment that we have. Usually those spots of the field, if they're dry, are baked, and when you seed through them, they crust, they crack, you can't get a good row closure. Or if they're wet, they're packed so tight after seeding them that there's no oxygen left in that soil, and any type of moisture whatsoever is just going to sit on the surface and not infiltrate. And when that soil does dry out, it's concrete, for lack of a better term. It's really difficult to develop root system. There's no pore space, and the crop emergence is very poor. And there's a large portion of the prairies that has these problems. There's a lot of potential in those parts of the fields that have high sodium, high magnesium, that if we could apply gypsum, get the calcium concentration higher, and hopefully that calcium would displace the sodium and magnesium from the soil cation exchange, move that into the soil solution, and then try to remove that sodium, that high magnesium from that soil solution, and improve the soil flocculation. With those large calcium molecules with that strong cation bond, you should be able to get your soils to form some nice stable aggregates that are not going to just completely compact into each other like potting clay, for lack of a better term. Some of the soil out there is clay, pure clay, that will adhere to each other. It'll compact, and it's not going to allow any water infiltration, or it's not going to allow any roots to expand in that soil. If we could use gypsum to mitigate that high cation exchange soil and try to improve that soil structure. When we were doing trials with gypsum in comparison to ammonium sulfate, when we first started working with it, we put it in the most difficult spots that we thought would be the best place for it and really challenge it. So what we did is we worked with a couple of farmers who have some certain zones of their field that are extremely high in sodium. I'm talking about like white crusting in the summer. And we did 200 pounds per acre of seed placed gypsum on canola in a comparison with nothing seed placed. So just canola seed versus 200 pounds per acre seed placed in gypsum. What we found was the seed placed gypsum strips had more uniform emergence, earlier emergence, and a higher plant stand. Usually it was actually about double the amount of plants. The one thing we did visually notice throughout the growing season, though, I remember specifically the one day Steve Cowan and I were out there checking on these strips during flowering, and it was a super hot day. One of those days that you question, should you just leave the truck running at the edge of the field with air conditioning on so that it's not a complete sweat box when you get back into it? And so we were walking out in the field and we got to the strips, and we could visually see as we were walking up to them where we had those strips, because throughout the canola field, as a lot of people know, when on a hot day, you'll see the canola plant will flip those leaves. You see the bottom side of the leaf from as you're walking through the canola field is the stress response to that heat. Once we got to those gypsum treated strips, none of the leaves were flipped. The plants seemed a bit more erect. The flowers looked a bit healthier, a little bit stronger yellow, which I know isn't a really quantitative thing, but visually you could tell. And that was one thing that really stood out to us, is that it was handling that heat stress significantly better than where we didn't apply the gypsum. It did show us that there is something that calcium is doing for the plants that we don't quite fully understand all the benefits there yet. And there's a lot of potential there as to what it could help our soils and help our yield potential.